Hey guys, I'm Jennifer Sheridan, the Family Services Coordinator at the Coleman Center in Petal, Mississippi. And if you're watching this, you're likely a counselor or will be a counselor at the YMCA in probably either Petal or Hattiesburg. But thanks so much for watching. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about behavior management in young children. And like I said, I work for the Coleman Center, which is a parent and family center in Petal. And we work with families of all shapes and sizes on child development, on supporting them through behavior management, supporting them through their child's education. And so for my job, what I get to do is not just educate you here at the YMCA counseling, online counseling training, but I work with families individually as a therapist. And it's really a great opportunity for me to get to know more families in our area, but also to continue my work in supporting families. So today we're going to talk about behavior management. I'm going to share a slideshow with you if I can get it pulled up. So I'm going to do that now. But we're going to talk a lot today about what are some things that you can do in order to really help your summer to go smoothly. If you are watching this and you're doing after school care, to do that as smoothly as possible, because this is challenging work. Working with young children it's difficult. And then the work that you're doing and bringing so many different family units together into one group, whoa, that's hard enough for parents in their own home to figure out how to manage behavior. But what you're doing is incorporating so many value systems, so many discipline systems into one. So lucky for you, I do have some resources for you. I do have some ways that I think you guys can benefit if you're willing to try it. Now, this is like investment parenting. So it's like hard work in the beginning, right? Like a savings account. You've got to put in the beginning structure and nurture for children so it can pay off later. So the second half of your summer is much easier than the first half, which come July, I know most of you guys are worn out because I'm worn out as a parent. So let's just jump right in. And so I wanted to put this up. If you've taken college psych, you probably have seen this chart. This is Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. And what I wanted you guys to see is right in the center, that green line. This is primarily who you're going to be interacting with. I think for the most part, I don't think you guys have preschoolers, but if you know you're going to be in a preschool room, go ahead and look at that pink line above it. But let's look at that green line because you guys are going to be dealing with children who are school age 6 to 11, and they are looking for how can I be good? Which you are probably thinking about some kids maybe you had last summer or at a different camp, and you think they were not wondering, how can I be good? They were wondering, how can I disrupt this group? But truly, our key question in this stage of life is, how can I be good? And so children are just having to figure out how to deal with so many new different social demands, academic demands on their life. And so they're either going to feel a sense of competence or they're going to feel a sense of failure. And if we do that, then we're either going to feel a sense of industry or inferiority. And that is what is underlying all of our motives in this stage when we're talking about development. And so I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we go through some things today and talk about maybe what you guys can do in order to help support this development and like speak into the season that these kids are in, because they're not generally in an adolescent phase. I don't think you guys have adolescents to come. That's a whole different ball game. The way you speak to adolescents, the way you interact with them, a different game. So it would be a different training today if we were talking about teens. So let's talk about what impacts this stage. Now, if our children have experienced trauma, And childhood trauma, here's a little definition for you, is the result of an event or series of events that cause a child to feel helpless and pushed beyond their ability to cope. So this can be one single thing, let's say like a tornado, which some of us have experienced here in our area a couple years ago, or this could be a series of events. Could be developmental trauma. This could be a series of abuse all throughout the child's history. And so you may be thinking, why in the world do I even care if a kid has experienced trauma? Well, that's going to impact their development. It's also going to impact their behaviors, as we'll see in a second, some ways that trauma influences this. Now, ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. This is what we have Vincent Folletti. He came up with this term doing a huge research project, and I won't get into all the details because hopefully if you haven't taken psych yet, or maybe you have or have done reading in behavior development, you've read about this. Very fascinating. But all of these things can impact us just like a single event trauma, like a car accident. But ACEs include things like my parents are divorced, or I experienced domestic violence, or I experienced the loss of someone very close to me early on. All of these things impact our childhood experiences and can lead to adverse health effects later on in life, which is very fascinating that they've been able to find that correlation. So I think it's important at this stage to say that some of you guys watching this, some of you guys that will be leading groups and caring for children at the YMCA, at whatever camp you're involved in, you guys have, some of you have experienced this. Some of you, if I sent you to take the ACEs questionnaire, which you can Google and find, it's pretty simple, straightforward. You can find it online. Some of you guys would score pretty high in this. So what we want to do is we want to avoid adding into this trauma. We want to avoid adding into more adverse childhood experiences where kids are feeling left out, or kids are feeling like they're being pushed away because they don't know how to cope. And that's what trauma is. It's like pushing past how we're able to cope. And so most of the time our kiddos, when we say they're acting bad or something like that, what they're trying to do is they are trying to figure out how to cope with a loss of control, how to cope with wanting to be connected with others, but they don't know how to do that. So we are going to be their teachers. I'm sorry if you thought you were just being a camp counselor and going to make sure kids survive, but really what we're trying to do is teach children how to be in the world and how to do that in a healthy way. So let's look at some impacts of childhood trauma. And I want you to focus on that left portion, that behavior portion, because many of the kiddos that you will have experienced, that you will have in your group, will come with experiences like trauma and adverse childhood experiences. And let's look at that, how that impacts behavior. You will have poor self-regulation, which is not at all what we want. We want kids who are able to self-regulate. But if they've experienced trauma, they may be socially withdrawn. They may be more aggressive than the other kiddos in the group. Lots of them will have poor impulse control. Now, if you are 10, you have poor impulse control because you are 10, right? And so if we couple that just being 10 years old and we're testing limits and trying to figure out how to be in the world, plus trauma, then we've created like the perfect scenario for high aggression. And then risk taking and illegal activity. Now, hopefully you're not going to have any illegal activity, but you may have a set of rules and you may see kids push those rules to the limit and beyond because they're not, how do I want to say this? They're not bound by the same moral code or value system that some of your others do because they have not yet experienced what attachment can be like. And so because of maybe relational trauma that they've experienced in their life. So we may see sexual acting out. This may be inappropriate touching. This may be touching themselves in a way that's not appropriate. to be in public. And so those may be some things that you guys have to address with the administration in your center. Adolescent pregnancy, you're not teaching us adolescents, so we're not so worried about adolescent pregnancy at this stage, but drug and alcohol misuse, and hopefully that won't go on where you are. But those are some things that are impacted by childhood trauma. And then if you go across the circle to the orange section that say emotions, this is another thing that's going to impact how you are able to relate to children. But just difficulty controlling emotions, trouble recognizing emotions. So in others, like, oh, they're getting mad, I might need to walk away. Kids have experienced trauma. Neglect of any sort may not be able to recognize. Although I would say on the flip side, some kids are super sensitive when they have experienced trauma. They're super sensitive to other people's emotions. And so we'll get to that later on when we talk about regulating ourselves. But they may feel excessive worry, shame, and guilt. All of these things are so impacted by trauma. So I just want you to be aware, some kids are coming into this situation. Some kids are coming into your class or your group, and they already have a deficit. Like, they're already down a couple rungs on the ladder because of what they have experienced at home. And now you're throwing them into a big group of people where you need to be the safe boss. You need to be the one that can contain all of their emotions in a healthy way, and then help them to manage so that they can have a fun time, right? And have a healthy, safe time while they're in your care. So we're going to cover ADHD and ODD because I know this is a common question I get asked. When people work with kids and their parents fill out forms and they've been diagnosed with ADHD or ODD, these are just labels for a set of symptoms. So this oftentimes is misdiagnosed. And so we don't want to ever just write off the kiddo because they've been given this diagnosis. Sometimes it's just confused with how a child has learned to adapt to survive. And so if you see these things, I want you to just like hold them loosely in your hand and realize this kiddo may just need more support. Not that this kid is bad, not that this kid doesn't know how to be with other people. Maybe they don't know because they haven't been taught. Let's hold that loosely when you see a diagnosis like that. So I'm gonna, this is just, if you wanna pause this and read up some of those things, this is just a set of symptoms and how we get to that diagnosis as clinicians. But and here's the one for ODD. But as clinicians, we are mainly doing this to get paid by the insurance companies, right? That's why we diagnose. That's why we have these things, this thing called the DSM. And it's just so that we have this way to categorize people so we can bill their insurance. And so this is not who this kid is forever, right? So we're going to remember that in the back of our minds if we hear this. And then we're also going to stop using these terms so flippantly. So let's talk about why screaming does not work. I know when I became a teacher, so I was a teacher before I was a social worker, and I would get mad and then I would like scream, and it just like, it didn't really seem to work. And I didn't understand why until later on. I did, you know, more research as a social worker, and I am much more aware of brain dynamics. And so what I want to tell you today is screaming does not work. It just doesn't work unless somebody is in a situation, a life and death situation. That's when I'm going to scream, right? Because I want to startle them and I want to activate that fight or flight. So right there in the center, you see that term amygdala. It's like a little tiny round ball. And actually there's two of them in the middle of your brain. They're the size of almonds. This is what can take over and rule our entire bodies when we become afraid. When we see a bear in the woods, we're hiking in the woods, we see a bear, and our body goes into fight or flight mode. right? And so our heart rate increases, our organs actually start shutting down because all of our energy needs to be activated so that we can run away for survival. So that's fine if I'm walking in the woods and I see a bear or I see a copperhead, right? Or I see a really massive, scary spider that just like crawled on my foot and I got to get away. For me, that's probably more plausible than seeing a bear in the woods. So the amygdala takes over. These two tiny little almond things, they send out a signal. Everything starts shutting down. And I've got to get the heck out of Dodge in order to save myself. Well, what happens is when we've experienced trauma or we experience things that are scary and we don't know how to cope with it, our amygdala takes over even when it doesn't need to take over, right? So you and I both know you are not going to hit a kiddo, right? So we come in, a kiddo knows I'm not going to hit them, right? If they're just standing there, we're just having a normal conversation. Somebody were to be like, do you think Miss Jen's going to hit you? I've built that relationship and they would say, no, she's not going to hit me. And they can't hit me here at the YMCA, right? Like I'm safe here from that. I scream like a parent screams who hits them, or like another adult in their life, or maybe even another child who has hit them before. I scream like them, right? Their amygdala takes over and they say, you've got to protect yourself. You've got to protect yourself. And so then they no longer see me as safe Miss Jen. They see me as a threat. And so then their amygdala takes over. So many kids experience this, even if it's not abuse, physical abuse, this could have been verbal abuse. This could just be that they have not realized that screaming doesn't always mean I need to overreact. But what happens is we scream when we're often in fight mode, right? Our amygdala is taking over. We don't know what else to do. And so we've got to fight this danger to get back into control. And so screaming at a kid is just not, it's just not going to work. So I'm going to tell you some strategies today that you can implement. And it's going to be hard for some of you because some of you guys, some of you grew up in households where screaming was the go-to, right? Your parent flipped out on you. And I can't change that for you. And I would say if you feel like that's hard for you to overcome when you become a parent, you're going to experience that on a deeper level, and you're going to have to make some hard choices about how you went to parent. So now, I'm not even asking you to parent now. I mean, some of you might already be parents, but for the most part, I think most of you probably aren't parents yet and haven't experienced this. But if you're new to this, you will get this sense where you're feeling overwhelmed and you're going to fall back to what you know. And so for a lot of you, this may be something new and challenging to do as far as how you interact with children who are not behaving like you want them to behave. So we're going to be smarter, safer, wiser, caring bosses in charge of these kiddos. And we're going to lead them and teach them, hopefully by example. So yeah, screaming is just, it just doesn't work. And I wish it did because it's so easy, right? Okay, so let's talk about what to do. So I've told you a lot of things not to do, right? Or a lot of things to be aware of and one thing not to do. So here's what we're gonna kind of follow this timeline. And when our kiddo is misbehaving, what we're looking to do, is connect, then correct, and then empower the kiddo. Now, empower sometimes we can do empower first if we're super aware of the needs of our kids. Sometimes we can empower them and it takes away the need to correct because they never get involved in the behavior we don't want them involved in. But the kicker is if we don't know that, it may have to come later on because a lot of times our kiddos give us behaviors that we don't want when we're not paying attention. And if you have 20 kids in a group or 12, even 12 kids in a group is a big group when you're talking about kids being active. then sometimes we're missing signals and signs. So the first thing we're going to do is connect with the kids. I would say if you can do something to connect with your kids in the very beginning, to start building a foundation, building a rapport, then you're going to have such an easier time when you need to correct them. So if you come in there and you're like, I hate these kids, I'm just doing this job because I got to pay my car note and this seemed like a consistent, easy job and I can get paid well to do it, you are going to have a hard time managing because kids pick up on things like that and they're not willing to take direction. They're not willing to take that correction from someone who's disinterested in them, right? You and I are the same way. We do not want to take direction or correction from someone who doesn't care about us. If I feel like you don't care about me or my well-being, I will not take direction from you. I just can't. It's like I have this block against that. But I'll use my boss for an example. She really cares and tells us all the time she cares about us. She cares about how we're doing, how we're feeling. She asks about our family. Right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? I don't know when you're watching this, but it's 2020 and we've just been like social distancing for 2 months. And my boss is concerned about us, right? And so when she has a correction for me, I hear that so differently than maybe bosses I've had before or situations where I've been under someone's leadership and I felt like they did not care about who I am or what's going on in my life, but yet they wanted to correct something. And so I was not able to take that super well. You guys are in that same position to do that. Okay, so here's how we're going to connect, especially when we are seeing a behavior that's not working out. So this is from Dan Hughes, super smart guy. So if you're into like child therapy or you think you want to be a child therapist or work with kiddos, he's a fantastic researcher to read from. But anyway, you probably don't care about that. So let's go to what is useful. PACE. If you can remember any acronym I give you today, it is PACE. We want to be playful with our kiddos. When we are going into a situation and, okay, I know I'm about to have to correct this behavior, one of the first things I can do is I can continue to be playful. Now, if you have a super flat personality, and I don't know if anybody's told you that, or if you've done enough self-reflection to know like you're pretty flat, this may be more challenging. Now, you might have picked up on the fact that I am very expressive. I have a lot of like facial expressions, especially when I work with kids. It is like, it can be a little over the top. We're an adult, but a kiddo is looking for signals from me. And so one of the best things I can do is give them super clear signals, right? So when I'm confused, right, like I squint my eyes, I turn my head, I'm just like a puppy dog, and I'm like, what? I'm so confused. Like, why you did that? I'm so confused. I may use funny verbal expressions, right? I may say things that I maybe don't normally say, like with my friends, but I may say something like, "Oh, whoa, cowboy, what's going on over there?" You know, I'm not necessarily saying that to my friends when I'm talking with them, or use "whoa, cowboy" just on the regular. But when I'm with kids, sometimes just saying something like that can just make a switch flip, right? And engages them in a more playful sense versus me coming in with like, I can't believe you just did that, right? Which is so easy to do. But what it does is it activates their amygdala, right? We're getting there even into like the hippocampus of the brain, where that's your emotion center. And it puts them on the defensive, right? So they see me coming in and I'm like, what are you doing? Stop that. Or I do the worst thing and I shame them, right? Oh, when we use shame, it's just like the worst. Or I say like, how old are you? Right? And this kid is now like clamped up because they have got to protect themselves. And so if I can come in playful and I can say, hey bud, what's going on? There's something going on. What is happening over here? Right? Is telling them like, I'm relaxed enough to handle the situation and I am not letting my anger take over. Because if I'm letting my anger take over, then they have got to put on their armor and protect themselves. So if I can keep it playful, it's one of the best things, best ways I can approach that. We'll keep talking about how that actually looks in real life. Okay, A stands for acceptance. Like, I want to accept this kid exactly as they are, where they are. And I want to convey that with how I treat them, right? Guys, you're gonna be with kids that are not gonna be your favorite. And that's okay. Like, every kid can't be your favorite kid, right? But you can find something you like about that kid to hang on to. You know, maybe it's they do something funny every time they come in and it makes you guys laugh together. Or maybe you can just say, you know, this kid might have something else going on in their life which makes them act this way. So I'm going to accept them just as they are. If you have favorites, and likely you probably will, if you treat other kids as less than, they will pick up on that. I don't care if they are kindergartners. In fact, I had a kindergartner, little friend, who was at the YMCA and who would tell me, my counselor hates me. And I was like, how do you know that? And they would, you know, start to tell me, and I was thinking in my own mind, oh my gosh, your counselor does hate you. But they picked up on those dynamics. They picked up on who are this counselor's favorites. And so I'm here to say, like, we want to accept all children. And if you cannot do that, you're going to have a hard time correcting behavior in the room. So one of the best things we can do is also be curious. So I like to wonder a lot. I do a lot of wondering in the therapy room. Like, I wonder how that person's feeling. I wonder why. I wonder what made you do that. Like, I wonder what's going on here. Wondering is a great way to be open to hearing what is happening for that kid. So if we go in and just say, like, I can't believe you did that. Stop it. Well, that kiddo may have had a really legitimate reason for doing whatever behavior it is, right? Because behavior a lot of times is about safety. It's about coming up with how I'm going to manage the social situation. If that kid doesn't know a better way, then that's the only way they've learned how, right? To survive, to stay safe. So if we can be curious, we might can find out, oh, this kid doesn't have another way of doing this. So we get to teach them how we want them to do it, right? That's one of the best things I get to do, is teach kids how I want them to do things in the therapy room. And then I teach it to the parents. And then I say, like, this is how we're doing things in here. And I can get kids to do follow all sorts of rules in the therapy room, but I stay curious and I say, like, you're not, doesn't seem like you're ready for that responsibility. That seems like it was overwhelming to you. Did it feel a little overwhelming, right? So I get curious. I don't just say, like, you're out of control, right? That's not helpful to just say you're out of control. You need to get control. But if I say something like, it seems like I'm wondering if that overwhelmed you when that girl did that. When that girl hit you in the face, it seems like that hurt you and you felt like you need to hit her back. So is that what was going on? And then I get them to communicate, to now verbalize. Okay, now I'm replaying what happened and I'm getting them to verbalize and tell me. And maybe they are angry and I am like, you were so angry. So I'm validating them, right? Which is our next one is empathy. I'm showing them empathy in the moment, right? That sucks, that girl hit you in the face. I don't know if y'all are allowed to say the word sucks, but I say it in therapy. I hope that's okay. But I say things like, that really sucks that she hit you in the face. And then you wanted to hit her back because you were hurt. I wonder if you wanted to hurt her just like she hurt you. And they're like, yeah, she's horrible. You're like, you feel like she is horrible, right? So now I'm showing empathy. Now I am like connecting with these kiddos on this level of um not just like verbally, but I am like in their brains, I am identifying with what is going on with them. It's exactly what I want as an adult, right? Like, if so, if something happens and I can't believe, I'm like mad, whatever, I have a couple of friends I can call and say, like, you are not going to believe this. And they are going to say, how dare they? How dare that happen? How dare she say that to you? Right? Not looking for them to fix it immediately. What I want them to say is, like, I am with you. I hear you. And these things you are feeling are okay and valid. That's what your kiddos are looking for. They are looking for you to validate their feelings and then teach them a better way, which is exactly where correction comes in. So I've got a reminder on here, and it says anger damages a relationship. Learn to regulate your own emotions. So anger can be powerful. It's definitely like, I don't want to ever not feel angry, right? Like I've got to feel angry because there's a lot of injustice in the world, and I need that anger to fuel me to help bring about change for what is good in the world, right? Fighting all the things that we are fighting now in the world, racism, sexism. I mean, these things cause me anger, and I want the anger to reside there. But what I need to do is be able to control and regulate my anger so that I can make change in the world, in other people's lives, and in my own life. So if you find yourself getting angry, often you wake up and you're like, I'm already mad. Like, I'm already mad at this group of kids. I have to go. Like, that's a you problem. That's not a those kids problem, right? So regulating our own emotions is so important. And if we cannot stay regulated, we cannot regulate other people. And regulation is about remaining calm in the moment to be able to say, like, I am getting elevated, and now I need to take a deep breath and bring myself back down. And for some of us, we're going to have to say, like, we're going to get triggered for some reason, and we're going to have to take a deep breath and say, like, before I go and address this, like, I need to take a breath and manage my own out of control emotions and then go and handle the situation, which is really hard. But if you master this now, you're not even a parent yet, you master this, you're going to be such a killer parent, because a lot of us, we don't deal with this until we become a parent. And then we realize, wow, I'm much more angry than I thought I was. So our next step is correction. So we've connected with the child, right? And this is not just, we're just letting our kids away with everything. So sometimes I have to explain that to parents. They'll say, so you just like let the kid get away with whatever? And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're doing here. No, no, I'm not sarcastic like that. But I'll say no. But what I am going to do is connect first, right? I'm not here to punish the kiddo with pulling away my affection, pulling away my ability to connect with them, because that's what we're all searching for. But what I am going to do, I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to correct the behavior. And correction is not always, hey, let me punish you, because correction is about a teaching moment, because what I want them to do is learn to do better next time, right? And if I look at punishment as the only way to correct, it's just not going to work out. So here's how we're going to correct it. I'm going to go immediately as I'm able to. So remember, I said, like, we've got to deal with our own issues, and we've got to deal with our own anger. If I am so activated and triggered that I'm not prepared and ready to go immediately to them, then I need to take a couple of breaths and then go over there. So I'm going to say immediately as possible, as immediately as possible. And then I'm going to be direct with the kids. So, okay, here's your acronym for this one. It's IDEAL. So if you can remember this, like, kudos to you. So I'm also going to be direct with the kid. I'm not going to be sarcastic, because you guys are teaching kiddos that are not ready for sarcasm. That oftentimes can be coded in their brain as a threat, or they just don't understand, like, or you're just being mean to them. And sometimes we are using our sarcasm to be mean. And I'm very sarcastic in my regular life, but I had to learn as my kids were much younger, like they didn't understand that. And if you have verbal kids, they will oftentimes tell you that, but kids who are not super verbal, who are not like communicating with you all the time, they may not be able to express, like they don't understand if you're being serious or if you're being funny. So I'm going to be direct. I'm going to tell them, like, after I've engaged them and connected with them, I'm here to like, bud, we don't hit in our group. We've got to keep each other safe. So I'm going to address the issue really directly, and then I'm going to be efficient about it. This is not a 20-minute long dialogue or a lecture, or like you've been waiting. Some of you have these parents. I had a parent like this, and I was like, beat me, please, just like spank me and get it over with. But I had one of my parents was like, no, I'm going to give you a 30-minute long lecture. And by the end of it, I mean, I was like wanting to just like pull my eyeballs out. No, we're going to be efficient here. We're going to address the issue, and it's going to be action based. So it's based on just the behavior. It's not based on like this kid, like you're a bad kid, you know, like, so I'm going to say a lot of things like that behavior was inappropriate. I use the word inappropriate, and if you'll use that word over and over again, your kids are going to pick up on that. So if you're like, they don't really understand what that word means, well, it's because you haven't taught them yet, so you get to teach them. That's not appropriate for this setting, right? Because there are sometimes some behaviors are appropriate. So for instance, walking, like standing on top of a chair, that may not be appropriate for your room, right? You guys are in like the room with chairs and you want everybody to sit down. So standing on a chair might not be appropriate for this setting. So I might say here, that's not appropriate. But guess what? That kid may stand on chairs at his house. My kids do. We stand on chairs. We stand on couches. We like tightrope walk across the top of the couch, because that's just how our family functions. But in a classroom, absolutely not. Like, my kids need to know that, right? So if you were their counselor, I would expect you to say, like, that's not appropriate here. And then we're going to get right at the behavior. And then what we can do is we can have them redo it so that they have a win, right? So we're correcting them and they know it. Like, they know at this stage, like, okay, something they did was not appropriate, did not follow the rules, was out of bounds, however you want to put it. And then I'm going to give them that opportunity to redo it so that they feel it in their body the correct way to do it. So an example might be, I'm not a hardcore, like a yes ma'amer, even though I was born and raised in the South. But it's more about, I want my kids to convey respect, right? And I also want them out of the space where they're upset or angry. So I may call out my kiddo and say, AT, right? I might call from the other across the room or in another room, AT, and I can kind of see them and they're like, what? Ooh, you know, I don't like that. I don't want to be responded with what? And I'll say something like, oh, whoa, are you okay? Did you hear me? And they'll be like, what? And I'm like, what? Let's try that again, right? Like, let's try that again. Well, my kiddo already knows, like, I don't want to be responded with what? And they're like, what? And I'm like, what? And then it's like I'm prompting them with like this verbal dance, and they know what I'm looking for now. And now it becomes this playful interaction. And then they're like, what, ma'am? And I'm like, close enough, right? Because what I was looking for them to say was like, ma'am, or yes, ma'am, or yes, even in a more polite tone, right? So what I was able to do right there is be immediate, right? I wasn't triggered by that, even though it's something that I want my kids to do, like respond respectfully. It's not just like a deal breaker where I'm just going to lose my mind, right? No one's dying if they respond with what, right? But I want to correct that behavior. And so direct and efficient. we get in there and we're done. Like, we're done with that situation. And then I ask them the question, you know, that I wanted to know, or I tell them something I thought they needed to know. But it was so action based. It wasn't about who they are. And I got right at the behavior, and we like danced and remained playful. And then it gave them the opportunity to kind of get out of it, right? To save face. A lot of us are not willing to give up our pride, right? When we're being corrected, we hate that. And that's just a pride issue. And so our kiddos, a lot of them are the same way. They don't want to be corrected because they don't want to know that they have done wrong, right? Because go back, to Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, that very first slide that we looked at. And the question was, am I good? Or how can I be good? That's what they're looking to answer. And if they feel like, no, you don't know how to be good, you don't know how to be good, well, then they're going to feel shame, they're going to feel inferiority, and it's going to continue to support unhealthy development. So it's funny how all of this is tied in. So how do you correct? You're going to use this ideal situation. We're going to go in, and then after it's corrected, we're going to repair, right? So if the relationship is broken between you and the kiddo, so like you as the counselor, and then you have this kiddo, and like he calls you some horrible name. Oh no. And maybe it triggers you, and you're like, I hate being called that, right? Like, one time I had a student call me a witch, but with a different consonant on the beginning. And she like screamed this out in the classroom. And this was like one of my beloveds. And I like could not believe it, right? And then I did the thing I asked the question you're not supposed to ever ask. I said, what did you say? And then she repeated it. And I somehow was able to stay regulated after that initial question because I was so mad at her, right? I felt hurt, which is what was behind the anger. I felt hurt that she said this because, like, she's one of my girls. I was able to regulate and say, please go out into the hallway. And I went out into the hallway with her, and I was like, what happened? What's going on? And she just started crying, hugged me, and I'm just like holding her. This is a teenager, y'all. This is not like a 6-year-old. It's like a teenager was doing this. And crazy stuff had been going on. But so we addressed that, and I was like, baby girl, you can't call me that. Like, that is so hurtful. But we were able to repair that relationship, right? And so trust was built. She came in. Of course, I was like, you're going to miss your break because you called me that crazy word. And so then it just gave her another opportunity to come in, and we could be together, right? So it wasn't like you got her at lines. It was really just like another opportunity to bring her in closer to me so we could build our relationship. But had I not repaired that relationship would have stayed broken, and she would have created walls, and I probably would have just been angry and not cared about her well-being. And so I would have been less likely to do all of these things. So repairing is so important after a relationship is broken. And this is not like we all have to be friends, right? But we all can be friendly. That's what I tell my kids. Like, every kid doesn't need to play together because some of our personalities are like oil and water, right? And so, but what we can do is repair that relationship to say, like, I'm going to respect you as a human. Which is what I'm looking for when I'm working with a large group of kids at this stage. So, some scripts for sanity. These are some things I'm proposing to you to take on. Now, come up with the way you want to say it. But if you can do a 2, maybe 3-word, gentle and kind is 3 words. Listen and obey is 3 words. But if you can come up with some scripts, then what we can do is oftentimes call kids back to a more thinking brain and have them like evaluate what's going on and what they're doing and how they can change that. So I might can say, if we're just in passing, okay, show respect. It's just like in this conversation, I say those 2 words, well, they already know, like I've already taught them what show respect means, right? So it calls them back to like use a more respectful tone or words, right? Stick together, no hurts, have fun is when I do group therapy or I work with groups. These are our 3 rules always. We do a little hand signal. We go stick together, no hurts, have fun. And you can come up with your own little hand signals if you want. But this is a reminder, right? No kid can remember 20 different rules. No kid wants to remember that, right? But if I can say, oh, remember we're sticking together, right? You're not running ahead of the group. So I just remind them, hey, remember sticking together. And then no hurts is like physical and verbal. I can encompass so much into that. So I just call them out and say, remember no hurts. I'm just calling out that behavior right then. And so maybe they're able to self-correct, but if they're struggling with that, then I give them the correction. Then I give them the opportunity to say like, hey, instead of that, I would rather you do this. Why don't you try this? Instead of that thing, remember, we're no hurts in this group. You try this. Again, this goes back to the efficient and the ideal way we're going to correct behavior, because we're not, I don't want to spend all day correcting your behavior, right? I'm going to give you this prompt, I'm going to say this script, and I'm going to call back a time where I've already taught you how I want you to be. So again, you've got to lay the foundation. I talked in the very beginning about investment parenting. This is like investment coaching or investment camp counseling. Right? Like you've got to put in the work in the beginning. At some point, when you're talking about rules, you're talking about the way you're going to be in your group. I don't know if y'all come up with like names or like yellow group or whatever, but like these are things I'm talking about. Like when we're talking about values and the way the code of the yellow group, like yellow group shows respect. So guys, in yellow group, and I'm having maybe like a 3-minute conversation, like in yellow group, what's showing respect? And they may say like calling you Mr. Jeremy instead of just Jeremy. I don't know if they call you by Mr. or Mrs., but whatever it is for you that you want, you've got to teach them that these things, these scripts are a great way to do that, because then you call them back to say, hey, remember, we show respect. And just doing that soft tone, I'm giving them this opportunity to like self-correct, self-regulate. So next thing is empowerment. Oftentimes our kiddos have ecological and physiological needs that will empower them to make better choices. So our ecological needs are like creating felt safety. So creating a group that feels safe for them, that feels like I am a part of this group. I am with this person who is going to care for me. That is creating felt safety, not like they have a fire extinguisher. We have a tornado drill plan hanging on the wall. No, that's safety, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about feeling safe on the inside. Also, creating transitions and routines sets kids up for success. If you guys have a routine, which I'm sure you do, I'm sure you guys have a schedule, because I know y'all rotate around, because I've been to the YMCA when everybody's at the pool. So I know y'all have opportunities to create transitions and routines. If you have a kiddo that's struggling with transitioning from one activity to the next, you may need to come up with a way to transition. So a way to prompt them to say, hey, 5 more minutes. Hey, 3 more minutes. When I give you the call, everybody lines up, right? So then I'm playful and I'm helping this transition, seem like something to look forward to versus something that I'm not looking forward to. And then physiological, you guys are with kids all day long if you're doing like a summer camp. But also if you're talking about kids that have come from school and you're doing after school care, whoa. Hydration, blood sugar levels, have kids have a snack. This is so important. Some kids become hangry. Some grown women become hangry when I've not had enough water, maybe when I'm hungry and you know, right before dinner time and I'm at a restaurant and I'm just like, oh my gosh, if somebody doesn't feed me soon, I'm going to flip out, right? Your kiddos are just as sensitive to that. So looking at those things, do we need to have a water break? Do you have some kids that need more water breaks than others? Trauma, what we talked about earlier, those ACEs definitely can impact our need for that. So that's something to be aware. And then healthy touch, you know, giving a kid a pat on the shoulder, doing a high five. You've seen those videos of those awesome teachers doing handshakes with everybody. That is healthy touch there. Some kids are craving that. These are the kids that are coming up and constantly putting their arms around people, and the people are like, get off me, get off me. Or they're coming up and they're wanting hugs. If you're not comfortable with that, like, set a boundary and say, like, look, I'm not comfortable with hugging, but I can give you a high five, you know, or I'm not comfortable with you climbing in my lap, which could be very triggering. But I am comfortable with you sitting right here and I can put my arm around your shoulder. Sometimes that can be so regulating and empowering to a kid. You can get a lot better behavior when we're doing that. And then just sensory. Do you have a kid that's falling out of the chair every 5 minutes and or they're wrapping their legs around their chair? Those are just sensory needs that sometimes if we're providing those opportunities for kiddos, then we are able to empower them. So my last caveat is let it go. You got to be like Elsa sometimes. You got to let it go, guys. And I'm not talking about, you know, turning things into ice castles. I'm talking about you need to let go of the anger and resentment that you build up towards kids. You have an interaction, you have a run-in with a kid. If you do those things, you connect, you correct, you empower them, then you need to let it go. You need to put it behind you and then move forward. So again, you can continue to repair that relationship. If you harbor resentment, 2 months is a long time to be a camp counselor for a kiddo. If the first week things go south quickly, right, your job is to figure out how to repair that and let that go. You correct that in the moment because most kids are able to let it go. Most kids will want to move on because they're ready to get on to the fun and the play. And so I say that same thing. I want that too. I don't want to keep feeling like I hate you, right? I want to address the behavior. I want us to correct that. Even if I have to correct it multiple times, like I want to address it and I want us to be in the moment there. But then I want to be able to move on because I want to go have fun the rest of the day, right? Like I want to see you laugh. I want to see you splash around in the pool or go play basketball or whatever and have a good time. I don't want you to fester as the kiddo all day long, right? I don't want you to suffer all day long because I don't want someone making me suffer all day long because of one decision that I made or when I had an outburst. I don't want to be reminded of that and then held down for that all the rest of the day, right? I want people to treat me with grace to be able to move on. So I hope this has been helpful. I don't even know if you're watching this all the way to the end. I hope you are. If you have questions, you can text me at this number below, 601-909-5135. Put your name, put you're from the YMCA or something. Let me know who you are. And say you have some questions. We can text back and forth. You can email me at jennifer.sheridan@petalschools.com. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Or if you want to call me, text or email me first, and I'll figure out a way since we're in and out of the office during this time period. But again, I'm Jennifer Sheridan, Family Services Coordinator at the Coleman Center. And I thank you so much for watching this, and I wish you good luck and wish you well in the coming days and weeks and months. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.